In this coding exercise, we're going to walk through how you can create an array that is immutable. Now, what immutable means is it's an array that you can't actually change. This is something that is very common in many other programming languages, but because of how dynamic Ruby is, it actually makes this a little bit more challenging. And this is part of the reason why data science and big data and machine learning aren't always the best fits with Ruby, is because having the idea of immutable arrays is actually something that is used very much inside of the languages like Python or C++ or Scala or some of these languages that work very well with machine learning, because you want to have the concept of being able to know what data is inside of a collection, and there are many times where you want to make sure that that data can't accidentally be changed. And so I'm going to walk through how we can do this in Ruby. Most languages, when you have the idea of constants, which a constant variable looks like this. In Ruby, it doesn't have to say const var. It could say anything. It could say, array elements. It could say anything you want, but it's all in caps. And if we have an array like this and put some integers inside of it, in many other languages, if we tried to change this, so in other words, if we tried to do something like this where we add a value to it, we would get an error if we tried to run this code. However, in Ruby, as you can see, this lets you add the value 22 to it, no problem. So as you can see, even though this is a constant, it can still be changed inside of Ruby. So what we need to do is we need to create an array here, or we need to change an array so that it can't be changed. And if you look at our test, what it says is it describes an immutable array, and then it says it does not allow an array to be altered. And the expectation here, it's a little bit different. If you notice, expect and rspec not only takes a argument, but you can also pass it a block. And by having the curly braces, that's what a block means. And so if you tried this with just a regular parens, you would get an error and this wouldn't work. However, what we're wanting is to actually run a process. So here we're saying that we want to try to add the value 4 into this unchangeable elements array, and we want this to raise an error. So this should, when we actually implement it, it should raise a runtime error. If we switch and run this code, so if I run December 25th, you can see that this still doesn't pass, which obviously it shouldn't. We haven't implemented anything. And all this means is that all we're doing here is with unchangeable elements, we're trying to add 4, and instead of it doing what it's supposed to, which is raise an error, it just lets you add 4. So the way that you can build this inside of Ruby is add the concept of freezing the array. So there's a freeze method, and if you look up the Ruby documentation for arrays, there is a freeze method here. And what this will do is, now if we try to change this array, if we try to add to it, change it in any way, then it's going to raise a runtime error. So if you run this code, you can see that this no longer is going to, a freeze just returns the array itself. It's not going to allow us to actually add anything. So if I try to do unchangeable elements, and now let's try to add 10 to it. If I run this code, you can see it raises a runtime error, and it gives the error, can't modify a frozen array. So this is exactly what we're looking for. We have created an immutable array inside of Ruby. This is better than using a constant or anything like that, because a constant will only at most give a warning, but it's not going to actually raise an error, which is what we want. So if I delete this, save all of it, now if I come back and run the tests, you'll see that they're all passing. So that's how easy it is to create an immutable array inside of Ruby.